Violence on the streets of Guinea's capital, Conakry, ended in tragedy for this mother. She says her 21-year-old son, who was a student, was killed by security forces for speaking out against President Alpha Condé and his government.
The neighbors called me and asked, "Is your child home?" I said, "No, he's not here. He went out." Later, they told me he'd been shot.
Tens of thousands have been protesting in the past 3 months, led by the National Front for the Defense of the Constitution. They're against Condé's plans to change the constitution, allowing him to seek a third term.
We're not for a third mandate or a new constitution. I'm not against Alpha, but against a new constitution. I'm here as a young person who's fighting for democracy. Alpha has to leave now. We don't want him anymore.
81-year-old Condé first came to power in 2010. It was Guinea's first democratic election after more than 50 years of mostly military rule since its independence from France in 1958.
Hello everyone, welcome to African Esquire TV. I'm your host, Tierney Cherie. I want to talk about what is going on over in Guinea as far as a possibly contested election. Before I do, you guys might notice that I'm wearing a hoodie. There's some mug shots. I am doing a fundraiser with We Charge Colonialism. We Charge Colonialism is the organization that I started with a number of activists, and the purpose of the organization is to draw awareness to the fact that we are being colonized in the United States. And we're trying to do a fundraiser where we will basically raise money to pay the bills of African Americans who are in jail. And one of the ways that we're trying to raise those funds is by selling hoodies. I'm going to do another video that's going to be more so about that project, but if you guys want to contribute, all the proceeds will go to this initiative. None of it will go to our pockets. All of it will go to the initiative to raise money for our brothers and sisters who are on bail. So you will see another video where I do a full announcement of that fundraiser. But if you're interested in getting a hoodie, you can go to wechargecolonialism.org and go to the Justice Bank tab and you'll find out more about that initiative. Okay, so let's go to the continent, the mother continent of Africa. There is an election going on and a lot of people are concerned about the possible results that will come out of this election. So I'm going to read from 2 articles, but first I'm going to start with just a general overview of what's going on in Guinea. So this is an article on Al Jazeera, and it's all you need to know about Guinea's contested polls. Okay, so scrolling down, voters in Guinea will take to the polls on Sunday to decide whether to adopt a new constitution and choose their members of parliament, which sounds fine, right? The constitutional referendum is deeply controversial, with critics calling it a plot that would allow President Alpha Condé to seek another term. For the 81-year-old who became Guinea's first democratically elected leader in 2010, the changes will create a modern constitution, and that will respond to the needs of the world today. So keep that in mind. There's the way that the president of Guinea is trying to pitch this is that we're trying to modernize. You always see a lot of these neo-imperialist people saying we want to modernize Africa. We want Africa to be developed. These are the words that they use to try to get the West on their side. But we should understand as African people that a lot of times when they're using words like modernize, there's another intention going on in the background. So it says since mid-October, protesters have taken to the streets to demonstrate against modifying the Constitution amid opposition suspicions that Condé is using the maneuver to seek a third term. At least 30 protesters were killed in the demonstrations, as well as 1 gendarme. Here is all you need to know. The government has argued that the 2010 Constitution needs to be changed as it was approved under a transition government after military rule. Okay, but the draft includes several progressive provisions, especially for women. It would outlaw female circumcision, for example, as well as underage forced marriages. No single gender would be able to make up for more than 2/3 of the government of government, and elsewhere the Constitution would allow 18-year-olds to run for parliament. Currently, only 25-year-olds are eligible. So I wanted to point out this particular part because I think it's important for us to understand the way that this is being framed. So the president has an ulterior motive. He wants to get a third term in office, right? But he is trying to mask it behind the idea of modernization. Now, I'm obviously a woman. I'm obviously for women's equality. So that's not a criticism against the idea of allowing more rights or more representation for women. But I also know that a lot of these issues that are gender issues, particularly in Africa, really are linked directly to Africa being colonized, really linked to the economic exploitation that happens on the continent that does not allow for our people to have things like women's equalities, who have things like the rights of children being protected. Because the fact is that we're on assault on multiple ends. Our families are on assault. This is not just in Africa. This is in the United States. Our families are under attack. So when you have all these things going on, unfortunately, there are a lot of maladaptive personality traits, a lot of maladaptive social issues that come out of it. So, for example, if you're in the United States, you may know that the Black family in the United States, as a result of being enslaved and being colonized, we have developed a lot of issues that are directly correlated to that. We have grown a lot of strife between men and women. You have issues with men being emasculated, or you have issues with women being abused. There's so many issues to me that come out of the white supremacist the white supremacist world that we were born into. And rather than talk about the issues in relation to our racial oppression, a lot of people want to isolate those issues. They want to talk about the fact that Black women a lot of times are prey to sexual molestation as a phenomenon in itself, and not link it to the fact that this is a historical it's been happening historically. It's a trend historically that has been going on in our families, but it goes back to slavery from when we were exploited by slave masters. So it's important to have a comprehensive view. We have to critique these issues, keeping in mind that we are people who are dealing with a special type of oppression and dealing with a special type of oppressor. And if we don't keep that in mind when we're talking about things like women's issues, we're going to completely miss it. And I think that's my big critique of a lot of Black women who do participate in the Me Too movement, is to try to act like these issues in the Black community, not in the white community, but whenever it happens in the Black community, that it's the same exact phenomenon as what happens in the white community. No, we're also dealing with a traumatized population. We're dealing with the people who were raped and brutalized by white oppressors. We're dealing with men who were forced to watch their wives be raped and brutalized. We're dealing with women who were damaged by slave masters and then looked at the men who were supposed to protect them and not see them as a protector anymore. So we're dealing with a lot of generational trauma. So I'm saying all this to say that it's the same thing in Africa. We're dealing with a lot of generational trauma. You would be surprised how many rights were afforded to women prior to colonialism. You'd be surprised how different the roles were of women prior to colonialism. However, under the colonial regime, just as the European imposed on Africans a number of things that were not native to us, imposed on us a white Jesus, imposed on us these ideas of what we were, of what our Black skin meant, they also imposed on us things that were not right as far as how we regard women, as far as how we regard our children, as we relate to one another. So that's one thing to understand. Now, in the president choosing to masquerade this as a woman's issue, to me is a signal to Western powers. Because what do we hear about the West talking about when they're talking about Africa? They don't ever talk about neocolonialism. Of course they wouldn't. They're the ones neocolonializing everyone. But they don't talk about that. They want to talk about women's issues. They don't want to talk about women's issues in relation to neocolonialism. They want to talk about women's issues as if they're an issue separate and by themselves. And this is a ploy to me, because it's a way for us to divert from the fact that all of these things happen from the oppression that we are suffering. And it's a way to try to isolate us and try to cause a divide and conquer among us. And to me, the fact that the president chose this is a way to appeal to those Western powers powers who want to have those conversations aside from colonialism. So now he gets to be justified in an international sphere. He gets to be justified by France. He gets to be France, who is, of course, Guinea's backbone. He gets to be justified by other Western powers because they want to say, oh, we have to allow this because they're trying to fight for women's rights. So let's understand that we have to know when we're being played against each other as African people. The idea that these people are so concerned with the rights of women, but they're not concerned with the economic conditions of those women. They're not concerned with the fact that those women are living inside of places that do not have any access to the minerals that their land is on. They don't have any access to the enrichment that these leaders are enjoying. That is something for us to keep in mind, that our issues are deeper than what they want to present them as. It's deeper than just female genital mutilation. Understand there's more things going on in the background that allow for that type of those types of actions that allow for mutilation of women, or also abuse of women. There's other things going on in the background. All right, so the thing that has come out recently is that there are two leading figures. I'm reading from an article. Two leading figures. This is on McCallbusiness.com. Two leading figures from Guinea's protest movement who were arrested. Ghanaian security forces have arrested two prominent figures from the months-long protest movement against Alpha Conde's plan to seek a third term. Ibrahima Diallo and Sekou Kunduno have given a press conference earlier on Friday to condemn the arbitrary arrest after this masked men belonging to the BRI security service broke into Diallo's house later on Friday. So, and Diallo's wife said they ransacked the premises before taking the two away. They have not been heard of since, according to Diallo's wife. Diallo and Konduno are close to Abdourahmane Sano, excuse me for butchering names, leader of the FNDC. Comptroller General and police spokesman Mamadou Camara said that he was unaware of any raid and that the BRI reported directly to the Prime Minister, not the police. So this is concerning, obviously, that we have our people fighting another fight against colonialism, but being oppressed and suppressed. But of course, the international sphere is not going to put pressure on the Guinea government, although had it been inside of another government, had it been, for example, when the Washington Post journalist disappeared inside of Saudi Arabia, and because he had a connection to the United States, the whole international world was condemning this. Had it been something similar, we would see a different circumstance. However, whenever the people are African, these things get swept under the rug. If these men are still alive, unfortunately, they are not going to receive the same attention, and they're not going to receive condemnation because Guinea, again, is being backed by France. So this is why it's up to us in all these instances of injustice, of our people being oppressed, of people being murdered by these regimes that are propped up by the West. This is why it's up to us to spread information, to spread protests, so that our people on the continent who do not have the same voice that we have can see their issues being addressed. So we will see what happens with this, especially with the president who is trying to get reelected and most likely will, because he has his buddy France backing him up. And again, they're using terms like modernization to justify oppression, and that usually works with the international sphere. So we will see what happens, but they're certainly keep spreading information about these two brothers who have disappeared, and we hope that we will see their safe return to their families. So that's all I have for this one. I will see you guys in the next video.